You won't believe what was hidden in the Titanic for all those decades. We've all heard the cliched tale of the Titanic's doom, the iceberg, the sinking ship, the tragic loss of life. Even after all this time, there are still many secrets and details left to uncover about this infamous disaster. From shocking revelations in recent photographs of Titanic wreck to the tale of an unlikely survivor, here are 20 new bone-chilling Titanic facts you've probably never heard of. Number 20. The third-class passengers only shared 2 bathtubs. Decades after, this modern-day passenger ocean liner seeks to recreate the iconic ship. However, beyond the allure of recreating history, the Titanic story is a striking reminder of the clear social divide that existed aboard the Titanic's original voyage. There were stark disparities in the living conditions of the different classes of passengers. While the opulence and luxury of first-class accommodations are well known, the reality faced by the 700 third-class passengers was far from glamorous. Among them, only 2 bathtubs were available, one designated for men and the other for women. Imagine the inconvenience and discomfort of sharing these limited bathing facilities with hundreds of other passengers. While the lack of bathtub access might seem surprising, especially considering the modern sensibilities of hygiene, it was not entirely uncommon during that era. For many third-class passengers, having just one bathtub for approximately 450 men and another for about 200 women represented a significant improvement from their living conditions back home. Some of them had no bathtubs at all and relied on sponges for basic cleaning. Even though the existence of bathtubs was a novelty, it's doubtful that most passengers, especially adults, would have regularly used them during the voyage. Many had already cleaned themselves before boarding the ship, and a week at sea wasn't considered too long to go without a bath in those times. In fact, even first-class passengers might have chosen to go a week without bathing, as it was customary during that era. Now, this is totally unexpected, right? Number 19. True courage. There were a few significant figures aboard the RMS Titanic, and one of them was Molly Brown. Molly Brown, whose real name was Margaret Tobin Brown, was an extraordinary and resilient woman who became famously known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, due to her remarkable actions during the sinking of the Titanic. Born on June 18, 1867, in Hannibal, Missouri, Molly grew up in humble beginnings. In 1886, Molly married James Joseph Brown, a successful mining engineer, and the couple settled in Leadville, Colorado. Their marriage brought newfound wealth and social status, but Molly's genuine personality and compassionate nature endeared her to people from all walks of life. In April 1912, Molly was in Europe and decided to book a passage on the Titanic to return home to the United States. She boarded the ill-fated ship at Southampton, England, as a first-class passenger. Her experiences during the disaster would forever cement her legacy as the unsinkable Molly Brown. When the Titanic struck the iceberg on April 14, 1912, Molly acted with incredible composure and courage. She made her way to the lifeboats and actively helped others get to safety, ensuring that women and children were prioritized for boarding. Her leadership and persuasive abilities played a significant role in convincing reluctant passengers to enter the lifeboats, saving many lives. After surviving the Titanic sinking, Molly Brown's actions during the disaster earned her the nickname, the unsinkable Molly Brown. Number 18. Cancelled lifeboat drill. As years passed, many claimed that the disaster of the Titanic could have been prevented, or at the very least, the loss of life could have been minimized. The cancellation of a lifeboat drill on the Titanic has been the subject of much debate and speculation over the years. It's widely believed that the absence of a proper lifeboat drill contributed to the loss of many lives during the ship's tragic sinking. The Titanic was equipped with lifeboats that could carry only a fraction of its total passenger capacity. The White Star Line, the company that operated the Titanic, followed the standard practice of the time, which dictated that lifeboat drills should be conducted for the crew and passengers to familiarize them with evacuation procedures. However, shortly after traversing the ocean, the lifeboat drill was canceled. There were several theories and accounts as to why this occurred. Some suggest that the cancellation was due to the belief that the Titanic was unsinkable, leading to a sense of complacency among the crew and passengers. Others claimed that the decision was influenced by concerns about disrupting the voyage's leisurely atmosphere, as lifeboat drills were considered tedious and unnecessary. Little did they know that this simple decision would prematurely end the lives of many passengers. Number 17. One of Titanic's 4 funnels was a dupe. One of the most intriguing and lesser-known aspects of the Titanic's design was the presence of a fake funnel. This deceptive engineering feature had significant consequences during the ship's tragic sinking. Not all of the funnels served a functional purpose. The 4th funnel, located at the aft end of the ship, was, in fact, a purely decorative smokestack. It was added to give the illusion of power and engineering prowess, making the Titanic look more imposing and impressive to passengers and onlookers alike. But this seemingly harmless embellishment became a fatal flaw. On the night of April 14, 1912, as the Titanic collided with the iceberg, chaos and panic ensued among the passengers and crew. In their desperate attempt to escape the sinking ship, many found themselves trapped in narrow passageways and staircases, including the space surrounding the fake funnel. As the ship began to tilt and list due to the flooding compartments, the fake funnel, made of lightweight materials, came crashing down, crushing and claiming the lives of several unfortunate souls caught in its path. Number 16. Vials of perfume. How would you like to smell perfume originally carried by a passenger on the Titanic? Adolf Saalfeld was a German-born Jewish passenger on the Titanic. He boarded the Titanic with several vials of perfume, hoping to make it big in New York. Regrettably, amid the chaos of the ship's sinking, Saalfeld hastily abandoned his fragrance samples, leaving them behind as the Titanic sank into the ocean. These samples lay untouched for nearly 89 years until salvage explorers stumbled upon a small leather pouch containing delicate perfume vials. In a remarkable turn of events, experts uncovered the long-lost fragrance and described it as a delicate floral bouquet evoking the essence of lavender and roses. Eager to unlock the secrets of this historical perfume, chemists diligently analyzed its composition, seeking to recreate the scent for future generations to appreciate. Would you be interested in using this perfume? Now it's time for today's topic. Deep beneath the icy waters of the Atlantic, the Titanic wreck continues to captivate the world. Over a century after the tragic sinking, unmanned underwater drones still explore its haunting remains. But there's one story that seems to resurface time and again among researchers and enthusiasts. As the drones capture eerie footage of the wreck, strange figures occasionally appear amidst the decaying corridors and decks of the Titanic. These figures, vaguely human-shaped, seem to stand in silent watch, as if frozen in time. Some say they are spirits of the passengers and crew who perished that fateful night in 1912. The theory goes that these souls are bound to the shipwreck, unable to leave the watery grave where their lives ended so tragically. This image, however, is not an actual photo from the Titanic, but a computer-generated recreation meant to visually express the tales told by divers and researchers. It captures the eerie atmosphere and the haunting stories, giving us a glimpse of the legends surrounding the shipwreck. So what do you think? Haunting spirits, artistic interpretation, or just underwater pareidolia? Either way, the Titanic's mysteries continue to intrigue, and maybe even scare, a new generation of explorers. Number 15. The lucky Violet Jessop. Born on October 2, 1887, in Argentina, Violet Constance Jessop would become known for her incredible ability to survive maritime disasters. This earned her the nickname Miss Unsinkable. Violet's first encounter with disaster occurred in 1911 when she was a stewardess on the RMS Olympic, the sister ship of the ill-fated Titanic. During a collision with the HMS Hawke, the Olympic sustained significant damage but remained afloat, allowing Violet to escape unharmed. Now, you would think that Violet would stop boarding ships and take up a job on land, but you couldn't be more wrong. On April 15, 1912, Violet boarded RMS Titanic as a stewardess. In the early hours of that tragic morning, the Titanic struck an iceberg and began to sink. Violet remained remarkably composed and fulfilled her duties diligently, helping passengers into lifeboats and ensuring their safety. She was later rescued by the RMS Carpathia and became one of the fortunate survivors of the Titanic disaster. The unbelievable streak of survival continued for Violet in 1916 when she joined the British Red Cross as a nurse during World War I. She was on board the HMHS Britannic, a hospital ship, when it hit a mine in the Aegean Sea. Despite the ship's rapid sinking, Violet managed to escape in a lifeboat and survive yet another maritime catastrophe. Was this pure luck, coincidence, or fate at work? Guess we'll never know. Number 14. The Navratil Orphans. Many lives were lost in the sinking of the Titanic, but even those who made it out alive didn't lead normal lives after the disaster. The tragic tale of the Navratil Orphans is one of the most poignant and bone-chilling stories to emerge from the sinking of the RMS Titanic. Michel Navratil, a Slovakian tailor, boarded the Titanic under the alias Louis Hoffman, seeking a fresh start after a failed marriage. Unbeknownst to his estranged wife, Michel had taken custody of their two young sons, Michel Jr., aged 3, and Edmund, aged 2. The three boarded the Titanic, hoping to start a new life in the United States. But alas, it never happened. As the Titanic sank, Michel put his two sons in one of the lifeboats, hoping that at least his children would make it out alive. The two innocent children were among the few fortunate ones to find places in Lifeboat 11, which safely reached the rescue ship Carpathia. They became known as the Titanic Orphans, as their father's true identity remained a mystery initially. Michel Jr. and Edmund were unable to provide any information about their family, adding to the tragedy of their situation. To this day, the story of the Titanic orphans remains one of the most tragic tales. Number 13. 30-second change. Each second is crucial for a navigator and a captain. Recent research revealed that perhaps half a minute, 30 seconds, could have ultimately saved the world's largest passenger liner in 1912, saving nearly 1,500 lives. You see, when the officer in charge of the Titanic was warned that an iceberg was on their path, he paused for about 30 seconds before passing on the command to change course. That slight delay allowed the ship to travel closer to the iceberg, drastically reducing the time available to avoid a collision. Experts suggest that an immediate response might have allowed the Titanic to veer off just enough to graze the iceberg, rather than suffering a catastrophic impact along its starboard side. However, some argue that the ship's immense size and momentum may still have made a collision inevitable, even with quicker action. The delay also highlighted the limitations of early 20th century maritime technology and communication systems, which could not relay or execute orders as rapidly as needed in such emergencies. Many believe this fateful moment encapsulates the fragility of human decision-making under pressure. The harsh reality, however, is that despite conducting countless simulations and exploring preventative measures, nothing can bring back the lives lost during the maritime disaster. Number 12. The unlikely survivor. Being intoxicated is something you wouldn't want to be when you're on board a sinking ship in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic Ocean. But the story of Charles Juffin proves that sometimes, luck can go a long way. Charles Juffin was the chief baker on the Titanic, responsible for preparing bread and pastries for the ship's passengers and crew. Born in England on August 3, 1878, he was well liked by his colleagues and was known for his jovial and friendly nature. On the fateful night of April 14, 1912, when the Titanic struck an iceberg, chaos and panic ensued. Passengers and crew scrambled to find a means of survival. Amid the mayhem, some accounts suggest that Juffin made a curious decision that would ultimately save his life. According to various testimonies and reports, Juffin was seen drinking heavily that evening, consuming copious amounts of whiskey before and during the evacuation. Witnesses later attested that he seemed inebriated at the time of the sinking. Remarkably, this alleged state of intoxication may have contributed to his survival. As the ship tilted and sank, Juffin found himself on the stern, the part of the ship rising out of the water. While many struggled to find a place on lifeboats or clung desperately to debris, he appeared to navigate the perilous situation with unusual calmness. Some survivors later recounted that Juffin was observed casually tossing deck chairs into the freezing water to create makeshift flotation devices. It is believed that the effects of alcohol may have helped him withstand the freezing temperatures of the water better than others, as alcohol can cause blood vessels to dilate, temporarily warming the body. However, scientifically speaking, you shouldn't drink alcohol to keep your body warm. It is counterintuitive. In reality, alcoholic drinks lower your core body temperature and increase your risk of hypothermia. So, perhaps Juffin's story could be attributed to sheer luck. Number 11. Class distinction even after death. The class distinction among those who boarded the Titanic wasn't limited to the ship's services. Even in the aftermath of the Titanic disaster, the persistent influence of social class distinctions remained evident, shaping even the handling of the victims' remains. In the aftermath, the deceased were sorted and treated based on their clothing and personal belongings. For the fortunate first-class passengers, identification was often straightforward, either through their elegant clothing or valuable personal effects. These individuals received the dignity they were accustomed to, with their bodies carefully embalmed and placed in coffins on the poop deck, awaiting a respectful landing for formal identification and proper burial. Their belongings were also carefully collected. However, a different fate awaited those from the lower classes. Their social status was cruelly judged by the quality and coarseness of their clothing and the value of their personal effects. Just as it had determined their treatment in life, the hierarchy of society persisted even in death, a sad reminder of the reality of our world. Number 10. Disgraced Titanic survivor. Surviving the sinking of the ship was Masabumi Hosono's priority. Just like other passengers, he knew that he needed to do everything he could to live. Hosono was the only Japanese passenger on the ship, and fortunately, he survived. However, it came with a cost, one that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Hosono's journey aboard the Titanic began as a matter of official business. He was 42 years old when he boarded the Titanic as a second-class passenger in Southampton, England. Hosono was part of a small delegation representing the Japanese government, returning from a diplomatic mission in Europe. When the Titanic struck the iceberg and chaos ensued, Hosono found himself among the scramble for lifeboats. Despite the prevailing women and children first protocol, he managed to secure a spot on Lifeboat 10, one of the last boats to be lowered into the frigid waters. His presence in the lifeboat caused outrage and condemnation from some of his fellow passengers, who believed he had acted selfishly by not adhering to the prevailing social norms and allowing women and children to board the lifeboats first. Even his own countrymen scorned him, and he was sometimes referred to as Titanic's coward in the media. His actions were perceived as a disgrace to the nation, and he faced immense public scrutiny and criticism. Hosono's own government was quick to distance itself from him, viewing his actions as a diplomatic embarrassment. Despite the criticism, Hosono continued his career in the Ministry of Transport until his retirement. Over the years, Hosono's story faded from public consciousness, and he lived out the rest of his life in relative obscurity. He passed away in 1939, and his tale was primarily forgotten by the world. Number 9. A clairvoyant. Over a century ago, the Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage from England to New York City, carrying the dreams and aspirations of its passengers. As the largest and most luxurious ship of its time, it was the epitome of technological advancement. It was hailed as unsinkable. But on the night of April 14, 1912, tragedy struck when the Titanic collided with an iceberg, making it one of the most renowned maritime disasters to date. One person believed he foresaw the Titanic disaster happening. William Thomas Stead, a British journalist, editor, and social reformer, was well known for his investigative reporting and advocacy for various causes. He was a notable individual, but he is more well known for his prediction about the RMS Titanic. According to the story, which has become somewhat of a legend, Stead supposedly made a prophecy about his own death involving a large ship. In 1892, he wrote a short story titled From the Old World to the New, where a character named W.T. Stead dies after the ship he boards collides with an iceberg in the North Atlantic. The story detailed the shipwreck and loss of life in a way that eerily foreshadowed the tragic fate of the Titanic, which sank decades later on April 15, 1912. When news of the Titanic's sinking reached the public, people discovered the curious coincidence between Stead's fictional tale and the real-life events. Many were intrigued by this alleged prediction and saw it as an eerie premonition. Number 8. Messages in bottles. Decades after the tragedy, 2 messages linked to the Titanic were discovered. A message in a bottle was found in 2017, allegedly written by a French girl named Mathilde Lefebvre. Historical records revealed that the 12-year-old girl indeed boarded the Titanic accompanied by her mother. The two were on their way to New York, where their family awaited their arrival. One of the most customary practices at the time was to drop letters and messages stored inside bottles during a voyage. Mathilde wrote one just before the ship collided with the iceberg. It simply read, "I am throwing this bottle into the sea in the middle of the Atlantic. We're due to arrive in New York in a few days. If anyone finds this, tell the Lefebvre family in Leven." This wasn't the only message in a bottle linked to the maritime disaster. In 2011, a family donated a chilling letter written by 19-year-old Jeremiah Burke. In the letter, he wrote his last words from the Titanic, "Goodbye to all. Burke of Glanmire, Cork." Miraculously, the bottle ended up miles away from his family's house. As years passed, many began questioning the authenticity of these letters. To this day, experts are trying to decipher whether these letters were indeed written by people linked to the RMS Titanic. Number 7. Sheet music of the last song played. Among the haunting remnants of the Titanic's tragic sinking is a poignant piece of sheet music from Starland Intermezzo, composed by Will G. Marketh. It was found bound in the leather case of Wallace Henry Hartley, the lead violinist and bandleader of the ill-fated ship's 8-piece orchestra. This leather case, remarkably preserved after being submerged for days, became a powerful symbol of the musician's courage and dedication. Survivors recounted how the orchestra played as chaos unfolded, their melodies offering solace to the terrified passengers. The most iconic piece they performed was said to be Nearer, My God, to Thee, though this claim has been debated over the years. These musicians, hailed as heroes, refused to abandon their post, choosing instead to calm the doomed passengers with music until the very end. The band's collective bravery has since been immortalized in films, books, and memorials worldwide. Unfortunately, both bands that played their Symphony of Death perished in the disaster. Their story stands as one of selflessness and grace in the face of unimaginable tragedy, leaving an enduring legacy. Number 6. The youngest Titanic survivor and the last one who passed. One of the most unforgettable names etched in the history of the Titanic is Melvina Dean. Born on February 2, 1912, she was just 2 months old when she embarked on that fateful journey alongside her family. As destiny would have it, Melvina would become the youngest survivor of the Titanic disaster. On the night of April 14, 1912, the Titanic struck an iceberg and began its inexorable descent into the icy depths of the Atlantic. Melvina's father, Bertram Dean, secured a place in Lifeboat 10 for his wife Georgetta and their 2 young children, Melvina and her elder brother, Bertram Jr. As the lifeboat descended into the water, The Deans were among the fortunate few to escape the vessel's tragic fate. The Dean family were among the lucky ones. In the years that followed, Milvina grew up with little knowledge of the significance of her survival. It wasn't until she was 8 years old that she learned about her connection to the infamous shipwreck. As the decades passed, she became one of the last living links to the maritime disaster. Milvina's life ended in 2009. In her last moments, she found herself in need of financial assistance to cover her medical expenses. Admirers and Titanic enthusiasts rallied to support her, raising funds to ensure she could live out her remaining days in comfort. She passed away peacefully on May 31, 2009 at the age of 97. Number 5. British newspapers initially claimed no lives were lost. Expectedly, the aftermath of the Titanic sinking was shrouded in disbelief and confusion. Amidst the chaos, a strange and troubling event unfolded. The day after the tragic sinking, on April 15, 1912, some British newspapers shockingly reported that no lives were lost in the disaster. This misinformation spread rapidly due to the limited and unreliable communication methods of the time, creating a false sense of relief among families desperate for news. The error stemmed from initial wireless transmissions that misinterpreted the gravity of the situation, as early messages only hinted at the ship's distress, not its full-scale catastrophe. Meanwhile, passengers' loved ones clung to this mistaken hope, only to be devastated when the truth emerged days later. Amid the unfolding tragedy, certain British newspapers mistakenly declared that all passengers and crew had been rescued and that no lives had been lost. The subsequent correction of this error intensified the grief of families as they grappled with the sudden shift from hope to despair. This erroneous information, although believed to be unintentional, added to the sadness and false hope of those awaiting news about their loved ones on the Titanic. It serves as a somber reminder of the profound impact of communication errors during moments of crisis. Number 4. World's most valuable biscuit. This seemingly ordinary piece of biscuit has come to be known as the most valuable biscuit in the world. After all, it sold for a staggering $23,000. You see, this piece of biscuit was said to be a part of a survival kit discovered among the Titanic rescue boats. Despite its age and fragile condition, the biscuit has remained remarkably well preserved, a testament to the careful storage over the decades. Its rarity and direct connection to one of history's most famous maritime tragedies made it an irresistible collector's item for Titanic enthusiasts. The biscuit was preserved within a Kodak photographic envelope, accompanied by the original notation that read, "Pilot biscuit from Titanic lifeboat April 1912. It also stands as a symbol of the sheer desperation and resourcefulness of the Titanic survivors, who relied on such simple provisions for their survival. The biscuit sold for $8,000 more than it was expected to receive, earning it the title of the world's most valuable biscuit by auction house Henry Aldridge and Son. Its sales sparked debates about the value of historical memorabilia and the lengths collectors will go to own a piece of history. I don't know who has enough money to buy a piece of biscuit for over $20,000, but I salute them. Number 3. Menu of the ship's last meal. Among the rescued documents from the Titanic's ill-fated journey are 2 menus from the night of April 14th. One of these menus belonged to the privileged first-class passengers, some of whom paid exorbitant sums for their voyage on the grand ship. The menu presented a lavish 10-course affair, showcasing the haute cuisine of that era. This dining experience included delicate hors d'oeuvres, followed by succulent oysters, and a sumptuous filet mignon. Delicacies such as pâté de foie gras and Waldorf pudding graced the menu, tantalizing the taste buds of the discerning guests. To complement each course, an assortment of wines was thoughtfully selected to enhance the flavors of the rich dishes. And if the diners' appetites had not yet been satiated, an array of cheeses and fresh fruits awaited them, providing a delightful continuation of their gastronomic journey. Sounds like a real treat, but its price compensates for it. After all, in today's money, a meal good for about 10 to 12 people on the Titanic would cost a staggering $124,000. Number 2. A piece of hull. This massive chunk of metal is known as the Big Piece, an enormous section of the Titanic's shell plating weighing 15 tons. With a recovery budget of a staggering $3 million, explorers lifted this piece from the wreck. Its journey to the surface was a delicate operation requiring advanced engineering techniques to ensure it wasn't further damaged during the process. The recovery of the Big Piece offered historians and engineers invaluable insights into the ship's construction, shedding light on the craftsmanship and materials used in its era. The location where the Big Piece was found suffered near-total devastation during the ship's fateful breakup. As the Titanic split in two, numerous fragments of shell plating, along with various objects from the ship's interior, were jettisoned into the depths of the ocean. Forensic analysis of the rivets and steel in the Big Piece helped investigators understand the structural weaknesses that contributed to the ship's tragic fate. Examining the tattered edges, the bent plates, and the twisted beams of this significant artifact serves as a solid reminder of how violently the ship crashed into the iceberg. Its display in museums continues to evoke awe and sorrow, allowing visitors to connect with the haunting legacy of the Titanic. Number 1. The ship that could have rescued passengers. Over 1,500 people lost their lives in the catastrophe of the Titanic, but many believe that several ships could have aided the sinking ship of dreams to mitigate the loss. One of the closest vessels to the Titanic when it struck the iceberg was the RMS Californian, a British Leland Line steamer. Despite being only a few miles away, the Californian's wireless operator had already signed off for the night and most likely headed to bed when the Titanic issued its distress signals. The lack of response from the Californian has been a subject of intense scrutiny and criticism over the years. Had the Californian promptly responded to the Titanic's aid, it might have been able to rescue a significant number of passengers before the ship sank. Similarly, the Carpathia, a Cunard Line ship, received the Titanic's distress call and rushed to the scene. Although it arrived about an hour and a half after the Titanic sank, the Carpathia managed to rescue around 700 survivors from lifeboats in the frigid waters of the North Atlantic. The tragic irony is that had the Titanic struck the iceberg just a few hours later, it would likely have encountered other ships, such as the SS America and the SS Baltic, which were in the vicinity and could have responded to its distress signal. However, due to the ship's ill-fated timing and the unfortunate combination of circumstances, the Titanic found itself isolated in a vast expanse of the ocean when disaster struck. Imagine the overwhelming despair of the crew as they sent distress signals and got no response, slowly freezing to death in the icy waters. Which of these Titanic stories intrigued you the most? If you know any other fascinating facts about the RMS Titanic that we didn't mention, feel free to share them in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the other cool videos on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one.